Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! Okay, just a reminder, Coffee Talk is for conspiracy theories and rumors and ideas that I find interesting but don't necessarily believe. So, before we get started on today's topic, which is my top 7 celebrity conspiracy theories, before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about the future of the channel real quick. Many of you watching are not regular viewers of my other content like sermons, and you're mainly my Coffee Talk crowd, which includes my people who are members of the Sheep Pen Ministry as well. But I want to talk to you about my moving over to Twitter. If you are a fan of the old school Sage Wanderer videos back in the day when I could say whatever I wanted to say, then you're going to appreciate my Twitter feed. So I'm going to try to put some kind of link in the description. If I don't, you can find me as Sage Wanderer at the real Sage, or at the Sage Wanderer. Sage Wanderer at the Sage Wanderer on Twitter. And yeah, I've only got 38 followers, but we're moving on up. So jump on over there and you can get all the political stuff that I don't talk about on YouTube anymore. Also, I want to start making long content video there. I'm limited to 2-minute videos right now. I'm going to do a series of those, but if you would like to sponsor my blue check mark on Twitter, please drop me a donation at the PayPal in the description. Also, there's a Cash App in the description, or you can send something to my P.O. Box. My annual fee for the blue check mark is $115 roughly, $114 and change. So if you want to sponsor that, I will immediately get my videos running up full length on Twitter. But right now, I'm getting to enjoy some of that Facebook type of discussion that we used to be able to do on Facebook, with total freedom, by the way. Thank you, Elon Musk, who is looking like he may actually go and do a cage match with Zuckerberg from Facebook. Don't. That's weird. We're going to cover that as well, probably over on Twitter. But let's get started talking about my top 7 conspiracy theories that I find interesting, but don't necessarily consider them to be true. So take them with a grain of salt. And these are all about Hollywood and famous people. So I've had a lot of requests to cover the Paul McCartney conspiracy theory, which is over 50 years old. And it's the idea that Paul McCartney mysteriously died in a car wreck early on in the Beatles' career, and that starting about the time of right before the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band change-up of the Beatles. If you remember, I'm not a big Beatles fan, and many of you are Beatlemaniacs, right? But yeah, right around that time period, they took a major change in their approach. They grew their hair longer, they grew beards, they started dressing in more hippie-style clothes, and it was right there where they believe, the conspiracy theory is, that Paul McCartney had passed away, and he was replaced with a Paul McCartney look-alike that the Beatles taught how to play and sing. Well, I don't know how I feel about this, but I will say this, that I think the Paul McCartney of Wings is way more impressive than the Paul McCartney of the early Beatles. In my opinion, I'm a big fan of Paul McCartney and Wings. So whoever this guy is, whether he's the original Paul or a fake Paul, I like him better. And I think a lot of these replacement theories are kind of based on things like the fact that people change over time, that they age, their face changes. Some people engage in dental procedures that change their looks, plastic surgery that change their looks. Their opinions and attitudes towards certain political things will change over time, and their music changes as they age and mature. But there's a lot to the Paul McCartney thing, including backward masking. Backward masking is playing records backwards. So there is a particular song that when you play it backwards, it sounds very much like they're saying Paul is dead. This conspiracy theory has come and gone and risen and fallen over a whole 50-year period, a half a century. So it's definitely the oldest conspiracy theory around a rock band that I can think of. And so some of the stuff in the Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover make people believe that there is a what do you call it, uh, like subliminal programming, or like predictive programming, where they're telling you the truth about what happened, and they're doing it in visual form. I believe it's the Abbey Road album cover that a lot of people reference as well, where all four Beatles are walking across a crosswalk, and the first person is John Lennon, who's looking very much like a Jesus character. Okay, and I can't remember what Ringo's dressed up like, but then you got Paul, who's dressed in a suit with no shoes on. Now, Paul McCartney says that that day he was wearing sandals with a suit. I mean, it was, the hippie days, so maybe so. But he was hot, and so he kicked his sandals off, and that's the reason he had bare feet. But everybody knows that they don't put shoes on a corpse when they bury them, and they're barefooted. So there a lot of this comes from that album cover, where it appears that, and then I believe it's George Harrison is dressed up, or maybe Ringo is dressed up like a gravedigger right behind Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney's the only one who's out of lockstep. That all the other ones have one foot forward in their step across the crosswalk in the album cover. And once again, I'm not a Beatles fan, so if I get some of this wrong, just correct me in the comments section, or feel free to add your take on any of this stuff that we're talking about. But he's out of step with the other three Beatles. They all seem to be in costumes that tell a story about Paul McCartney really being dead. And then there's a Volkswagen Bug in the same picture. The license plate says if 28 or something like that, 28 if. Then saying that if Paul McCartney had lived, he would have been 28 at the time of this album cover, which matches up. The only problem is the license plate doesn't say 28 if, it says 28 1F. But a 1 and an I look the same. The story from the Beatles on the Bug that is in the shot there is that they tried to get the owner to move it. They couldn't find the owner. They couldn't find anybody to move the car, so they just put it in the picture because they had a limited amount of time that they were able to stop traffic on that road to take that picture in the crosswalk. Other elements are from the Lonely Hearts Club Band, both videos in support of that and the album cover. One is that three of the four Beatles have red corsages in one of the shots, and Paul is the only one with a black corsage. So there's all of this imagery, and they claim that through backward masking, through telling us in the album covers, they're basically feeling guilty about having replaced Paul McCartney. And so that brings us on to other stars, music stars, that people believe have been replaced. So Avril Lavigne. Avril Lavigne is said to have been replaced very early in her career because she committed, that she took her own life. I got to be so careful what I say on this platform, But anyway, so they claim she took her own life, and that she had a body double that she was using for public appearances. An actress who mostly looked like her pretty good, right? But there was some definite differences in their appearance, in their style, in their attitude. And she was impersonating Avril when Avril departed, and she just took over and became Avril Lavigne. I will say this, based on pictures alone, like the Paul McCartney thing, it's just Paul looks like Paul. I'm not really one of these people that thinks he looks different now than he did when he was young. I mean, he's got a very distinctive look. Avril, on the other hand, looks very different. Now, this could be explained because Avril Lavigne, when she first hit, was really young. And, your face changes, your body changes as you mature from, late teens into your early to mid-20s. And that could explain why Avril Lavigne of today looks so different than the original Avril Lavigne. And I will tell you this, her voice is different. This, as a musician, I can tell you. Now, this could be explained away, once again, by maturing. That the Avril Lavigne of the first couple of years of her career is a soprano. I'm a vocal coach, choir teacher, choir director, old school. I'm telling you, Avril Lavigne was a soprano. The new one is an alto. To the point where current versions of her song are in a much lower key than the original version. So when you hear her cover her own song, especially Why You Gotta Get So, what is it? Complicated? Agitated? I don't know. You put it in the comment section. But, Avril of the original early days of her career had a much higher voice than she does now. And so I can tell you the voice doesn't sound the same. But my voice lowers a note or two every year, especially the older I get, the more baritone I get. I used to be able to easily cover the high harmony over all the Eagles songs, even over Timothy, what is his name? Anyway, I'm drawing a blank. I need more coffee. I set my coffee down. That's the problem. Awaken brain. Timothy B. Smith. Thank you, coffee. Timothy B. Smith has a really high voice. I used to be able to cover high harmony over him. I can't anymore. I can't sing Purple Rain anymore, right? So these changes happen over life, and maybe that's the story on Avril. But to tell you the truth, she looks very different. She looks like a different person. So maybe I don't need as much coffee for the Avril Lavigne replacement theory as I do for the Paul McCartney one. And then there's the Michael Jackson concept, that maybe Michael Jackson faked his death or died previously and was replaced by someone else. And I think a big part of that is the huge transformation that Michael Jackson underwent in the early to mid part of his career, where he literally almost changes his total skin tone, for one. His nose is completely different. We know he did plastic surgery after plastic surgery after plastic surgery. The thing about Michael Jackson is the music is consistent. As a musician, I don't see Michael Jackson's music changing. He's very consistent in his voice, in his stage appearance, but Michael Jackson, with a talented person, Michael Jackson impersonators do a better job than most Elvis impersonators. That there are some Michael Jackson impersonators that make you think you're looking at Michael Jackson, right? The dancing, the singing, all of it. So could he have been replaced? Most certainly. Elvis may have faked his own death to become a preacher in Missouri. Don't. A lot of these I've covered already, but we're going to move on. That was just number one. I better get busy if I'm going to make this fit. So there's the replacement theory of Paul McCartney, Avril Lavigne, and Michael Jackson being replaced due to an early death, or in the case of Michael Jackson, maybe he faked his death. Not faked his death, but just disappeared, put a replacement in so he could continue living. Maybe he didn't die. Some people think Michael Jackson took on the persona of a young white man that he had been helping early in his career, who had been horribly burned and was horribly scarred. I can almost remember his name. So some people think that he took on that persona. He's hiding as that person, and he got himself a replacement. And it kind of goes around. It coincides with the the Pepsi commercial where he set his head on fire. And so a lot of people think that that's when he took his opportunity to change his face and bring in a replacement. Plastic surgery does make these replacement theories plausible, in my opinion. Number two, Star Whackers. This is exclusively a Randy Quaid story. Randy Quaid is the brother of Dennis Quaid. Randy is best remembered as Cousin Eddie in the National Lampoon Vacation series. He had a big part in Christmas Vacation. And so, but he's done a lot of different parts, a lot of B movies, westerns, all kinds of films, television. And I think he's a funny guy. Randy Quaid's a funny guy. But a few years back, I think around 2015, he donned a big Santa Claus beard, right? And looked very much like a hippie. And I got to say, his wife is a little woohoo. Something not, I'm just saying, something not right there in my opinion. But the two of them claimed that they were being targeted by a group of people they called Star Whackers. Now, when you think of whacked, you think of getting whacked, like the mafia kind of thing. And at first, that's kind of what Randy and his wife were saying, is that they were being targeted to be killed. But then, as the hit teams didn't come for them, They changed it to, well, when we mean whacking, we mean whack you down, like ruin you, ruin your reputation, steal your intellectual property, involve you in some made up scandal, drag your name through the mud, and ruin your career if you don't do what they say. Or sometimes he says they do it just to take what you have, right? And but at the same time, there's a little question mark on the Randy Quaid story, because I honestly think there might have been some pharmaceutical stuff going on in their lives at the time. It does kind of sound like a paranoia, but potentially chemically induced paranoia, right? So there's that. They got in trouble with the law for squatting in the guest house of an estate that they had sold already and someone else owned it. But, and their story tends to change. One of their defenses at the beginning was, we thought we still owned it. We thought we still owned it. And somebody had trashed or vandalized the main house. And so they accused Randy and his wife of vandalizing the main house while they were staying in the guest house. But they said they only stayed in the guest house. And you have to ask yourself, why wouldn't they stay in the main house if they believe they owned it? So there a lot of stuff doesn't add up with the Randy Quaid story. But he goes on to say that, you know, many stars have been targeted for destruction by the star whackers. What do you think? Do you think Randy and his wife were just on a bender? You think maybe they just had a little break in reality? If you watch some of their videos, they're out there. They made a lot of YouTube videos that are just kind of woohoo. And so, I don't know. I find this one needs a ton of coffee to swallow, except for the fact that I kind of heard this story before. You know, it kind of goes in with that Crossroads story and the deal with the devil and all that. And if you don't play along, they do stuff to you. They might even whack you. Dun, dun, dun. All right, let's move on to number 3. This is an interesting one that you may not have heard of. This is not a really well-known conspiracy theory. And it first comes to my attention from a guy named Orlando Brown. If you remember Orlando Brown, he was kind of a chubby child actor. And he played in kind of a spin-off of The Cosby Show with some of the people from The Cosby Show. And he says a lot of crazy stuff now. He's very much pushing some of the conspiracy theories concerning the network of people who prefer underage partners. Man, I got to be careful what I say on YouTube. Help me out. Join Twitter, and we can say what we really feel like over there. So, anyway, jump over to Twitter and follow me over there, and sponsor my my blue check mark so I can make videos over there. But Orlando Brown said something in one of his rants that blew me away. He said that these stars now, through supernatural kind of combination of technology and spiritualism, have found a way to do what's called soul migration. Now, this is different than reincarnation. Reincarnation, you got to die before your soul migrates to a new host. But in soul migration, what happens is you actually can possess another person. Dun, dun, dun. So according to Orlando Brown, these people are doing this now. That they'll get some up-and-coming starlet that's got youth and vigor, or some up-and-coming young, macho, athletic person, and they'll draw them in with the promise of stardom, get them to sign the deal with the devil, and in the fine print is they're relinquishing control of their body over to these people, and then they can use this spiritual technique to put their soul into the body of a much younger star. Dun, dun, dun. And so he claims that that they can move their soul from person to person. And he claimed to say that even people in the interview that were operating cameras and stuff had temporarily lost control of their soul and were being controlled by other superstars, that there were superstars in the room. Orlando Bloom sounds, or not Bloom, excuse me, let me get this right. Orlando Brown. I hope I didn't say Bloom earlier, but it's Orlando Brown. He's a little wackadoo. He sounds kind of cray-cray. But I do find it interesting, especially when you think about this rash of movies that happened, I don't know, 20 to 30 years ago. And according to Brown, this is when they started doing this. And according to the concept of oh, what do they call it when you have to tell people what you're doing? It's predictive programming, right? According to the Simpson level predictive programming here, this would make sense. But about 30 years ago, there were a rash of movies about soul migration. Big is kind of like that. A grown man goes into a young, the other way around. A young boy is put into an old man's body. I'm tongue-tied. I need more coffee. You know the plot. A kid is put into an adult's body, right? And I have talked about that, and I'll talk about that again a little later in this video. But yeah, you've got Freaky Friday, where a mother and a daughter switch places, right? And then you had another movie that came out with Dudley Moore and Corey Haim, I think, where they switched bodies. And Dudley Moore was in a teenager's body, and the teenagers had Dudley Moore's old spirit in him. And you know how that works. Soul migration. So this soul swapping is something that Orlando Brown is saying. He's a whistleblower saying this has been going on in Hollywood for a long time, and they're getting good at it, and they can just possess other people. Don't sign the deal with the devil. Just say no. Just say no and get yourself a Twitter or YouTube and something and make your own stardom. That's what I say. Welcome to the new world where you can be a star without their help. Doggone it. Just ask me how I know. Okay, this brings us to stars who have faked their deaths. This is number 4. Stars faking their own deaths. Of course, the obvious one is Elvis. We've talked about that quite a bit. You know, you could believe what you want, but it looks a lot like there's a guy up in Missouri who preaches, who looks a lot like Elvis, sounds just like him, sings just like him, and hangs out with Elvis's son. Elvis's, I guess, illegitimate son. But nonetheless, Elvis is the first one who was accused of faking his own death. And I think part of that is Elvis was so loved, people just didn't want to let go of him. They were just in denial about it. Elvis sightings were such a big deal when I was a young teenager and in my early 20s, to where it was kind of a joke, you know. You'd be seeing anybody that halfway looks like him. You'd be like, I saw Elvis. Elvis is alive. But there's a lot to this that sets the stage for some of these other storylines about stars who fake their own deaths, because Elvis Aaron Presley is misspelled on Elvis's tombstone. He spells it with, I think Aaron is spelled with 2 A's, and on the tombstone there's only 1 A. Would they misspell the king of rock and roll's middle name on his headstone? Or is that Elvis's way of telling you, that's not really me buried in there. That's not really me. That's somebody of my height, weight, and size that they put in my box instead of me. So this whole idea of faking your death to get away from stardom, to have a fresh start, to be a normal person again, kind of starts with Elvis. And it's one of the most powerful stories. But there's also a story of Jim Morrison doing the same thing. That Jim Morrison became unhappy with stardom. He was phoning it in the doors, and he'd made enough money between his songwriting that, you know, he co-wrote the music for the Doors, and most of the lyrics came from him. I think nearly all the lyrics came from him, and the music comes from I think Krieger and Robbie Krieger, and of course my hero. I'm just terrible with names. Let's see if it'll come to me with the coffee here. Anyway, the keyboard player / bass player for that band, he's a hero of mine as a piano player. It'll come to me. But anyway, they wrote the music, but most of the lyrics came from Morrison. So he was set up. He had all the money in the bank he needed, and he just wanted to start over, and he went to France and faked his own death. There's a lot of weird stuff around Jim Morrison's death. How his body was found, who found it, what they did with it afterwards. So there's a big belief that Jim Morrison faked his own death. Prince. A lot of people think Prince didn't die, but he faked his own death with a body double. And that he escaped stardom to live out his elderly years without having to, well, he just had double knee and double hip replacement. Like he had all new parts. So maybe he didn't want to wear those parts out rock and rolling like he wore out the rest of his body. So that's still an emerging conspiracy theory. It's really funny that these conspiracy theories start with a little grain and they tend to grow over time. That's why the older ones are the ones that seem the most plausible. Paul McCartney, Elvis, all of these conspiracy theories about stars. People say Heath Ledger might have been one of these people, a modern version. that faked his own death so he could escape stardom. But I don't know. You tell me in the comment section. These people kick the bucket, or are they out running around living normal lives with you thinking that they passed away? You tell me. The 27 Club, or the Deal with the Devil, or the Crossroads. That's another big conspiracy theory about rock musicians, particularly. And so it starts with Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is said to have gone to the Crossroads, I believe in Mississippi, where he met a person that identified themselves as the devil incarnate, and he signed a contract, a Faustian contract. The story's very old. It goes back to a person named Faust, who reportedly did this, hundreds of years ago, okay? And so Robert Johnson may have made up this story based on the Faustian story. But nonetheless, one thing that is certain is that Robert Johnson couldn't play his way out of a paper bag, that he could barely play the guitar, couldn't sing worth a flip, would often try to push himself on stage and play during the breaks of other musicians, to the point where he got banned from juke joints for doing this very thing, for just going up and taking over the guy's guitar and trying to perform when he was awful. And then he goes away and disappears for about a year and comes back a monster guitar player and a totally bad to the bone singer and songwriter, to the point where Robert Johnson is said to have basically single-handedly given birth to what we call rock and roll. And so it all kind of starts with this deal with the devil. And so at the Crossroads, they even made a movie with Ralph Macchio about the Crossroads. If you're a fan of the channel, you know I was offered the deal with the devil. I can testify, no coffee needed, that they offered me the deal with the devil, and all I had to do was give up my faith in Jesus Christ and accept whatever religion that they told me that to accept, and put up whatever fake front they invented for me, and that I had to keep anything else super private, that you can't be a Christian and be a rock star. And I declined. I declined violently. It almost went to fisticuffs over it. Let me put it this way. I threw the representative out of the bar I was playing in and had the bouncer escort him out the door. And so I can tell you that some of this is true. Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, these are all people who died at the age of 27 at the peak of their stardom. And this is the conspiracy theory called the 27 Club. That if you sign the deal with the devil to become super famous, super hardcore, massively famous for the rest of your Elvis style famous, that you agree to either fake your death at 27 or actually they're going to kill you at 27. And so the 27 Club is a long list of stars who all died in their 27th year. Was this according to the deal they made with the devil? Is this what it means to get a record contract? You know, is this the requirement that you go away before you get old? That you, what is it? The saying for my age group? Ray Manzarek. That's the keyboard player for the Doors. Ray Manzarek. You can tell this is in the morning, right? I might need more coffee. Sorry, that was a reverse backup there. But yeah, that these people, if they want to be big time stars, they got to sign this deal with the devil. And part of that is to either fake their death or actually give up their life. You know, I was in a band with young people, was one of my last bands I played in before I retired. And they were trying to get a record deal. And we got on the radio. I helped them produce a track that got some radio airplay on the West Coast and got them some attention. And I was talking to them about this deal with the devil thing and about my Crossroads story, when the youngest member of the band, who was so young we had to get special permission from the state to even let him be in the bar, right? The bars and venues we were playing in, because he was so young. He was, I think, 18. And when I talked about that, he said he'd do it. He said, I'd sign my soul away to the devil in a heartbeat. To be rich and famous? You bet. I would. They would. That's what he said. And I was shocked. But that is the attitude of a lot of people that aren't spiritually grounded. They don't understand the ramifications of such a thing. And they would sign their soul away to the devil and make themselves potentially, we would go back to the soul migration thing, make themselves even potentially get possessed by some other star out there, you know, and use their body in youth just to get rich and famous, just to have their name put out there. So the 27 Club deserves a video all its own. If you look in my library, I've done a video on the 27 Club. I did a video on a lot of this stuff, but some of it I haven't. Which brings me to number 6. This is the Black Illuminati. Dun, dun, dun. This conspiracy theory says that within the Illuminati, there's a special section that is basically the African-American version of the Illuminati, which is under the control of the Illuminati. But at the same time, these people are, they have kind of their own section where they take care of their own people. And this is really based around hip-hop and rap. And the king and queen of the Black Illuminati, according to certain whistleblowers like Orlando Brown, like, even Dave Chappelle has talked about this. Cat Williams has talked about this. Even Jamie Foxx recently talked about this. And right after Jamie Foxx started talking about some of the crazy things that go on in these Illuminati, SEX parties that these black hip hop artists like Puff Daddy and Will Smith and other people like that are involved in, Jamie Foxx started talking about that candidly, and then poof, he had some kind of medical problem, some kind of stroke, some kind of, we don't even know what's happened to Jamie Foxx. He's kind of MIA. I think he's about to get out of the hospital. He's been in the hospital for a long time. He's in recovery. He has not made any public appearances, to my knowledge, since he had this health crisis. And a lot of people believe that Jamie Foxx was poisoned so he'd be silenced. My dogs are going off. Hang on. Sorry, I'm back. I had to fuss at my dogs. I got my windows open this morning, and they were right in the front yard. So, back to what we're saying, though. Yeah, Jamie Foxx just kind of mysteriously got sick, and a lot of people are saying that he was poisoned for the things that he was saying about some of the more powerful people, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, who are seen as the king and queen, and P. Diddy, who's also seen as a high player in this hip-hop Illuminati. And this is really a hot topic right now. It's something that isn't being censored on social media as much as some of these other conspiracy theories are. And you can find a lot of videos about this very fact, that there is some kinky, weird, spiritually off stuff happening, and some definitely non-Christian type behavior, some cultic involvement with a thing called spirit cooking. Abramovich is a woman who's ahead of a kind of a spiritual movement called spirit cooking, and there's images with Jay-Z and Beyonce with this person, and there's connections to the political side of things as well in DC to this same person. And so it could be this kind of occultic thing that's going on that they're all involved in, that's related very much to what we would consider Illuminati or Satanism. And so, which brings us to number 7. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're watching this video, please run over and hook up with me on Twitter. Twitter's real easy to set up your own account. It took me literally 5 minutes, and you should go over there and get connected, because I may be taken off the air for what I'm about to say. But there's a thing that rhymes with meadow bing. They're meadow tiles. To speak in code, it's awful. There's the conspiracy theory that Hollywood is full of these meadow tiles who are involved in this ring, and they are doing awful things to people under the age of consent. Okay? Don't. Why do I got a talking code? Because they're going to take me off YouTube. Join me on Twitter. Running out of time. I put this at the end for a reason. Maybe they'll miss it. A lot of stars are coming out and talking about particularly what P. Diddy did to them. Justin Bieber's made some statements. Of course, Jamie Foxx we just talked about. But then there's the real facts here that there is something going on. We've got Kevin Spacey right now being tried, I believe, in London currently as this video is being made, under charges of, sounds like a meadow pile, right? He's being accused of being a meadow pile and having relations with very young men. boys, right? And that's what he's being tried for. And so you also got Weinstein, who's in jail for doing this to starlets. Now, he's not necessarily accused of going after underage people, just the casting couch, the sexual assault. Oh, I said it. The SA, excuse me. Please don't take me off of YouTube. Join me on Twitter, right? But yeah, we got Weinstein, and then of course there's the Jeffrey Epstein thing. What does Jeffrey Epstein have in common with wallpaper? They don't hang themselves. Don't. You gotta laugh to keep from crying. And then I will say this. I have a story cooking where I heard from a first-hand account, a person that claims to have been kidnapped by police working with Hollywood stars, and he was kept in a cage, and he barely escaped with his life. He was kept in a basement with a bunch of other young people under the age of consent in cages, and they were being abused. And this person is a viewer and someone I sat down with in person and had a discussion with. And I can't talk about this on this channel. And the very thought, I'm telling you, that either the AI or the alphabet soup listening devices that are everywhere must have heard this conversation, because as soon as I had this conversation with somebody and before I could make a video about it, they took me down for a video I made 5 years ago on this topic. Sounds like a pedophile, right? Medophile, talking about these people in Hollywood who are being accused of this. And at the time, it was a news story that I was just talking about 5 years ago, and they took me off the air for a week. Currently, this last week, they took me down for a 7-day suspension. So I had to be very careful about talking about this. And I think the reason they hit me that way is because they somehow heard that private conversation through these devices, right? And they knew that I was thinking about talking about this topic again. And so that's the biggest thing that confirms the conspiracy theory for me, is that they've come after me for talking about it. They come after people for talking about it, they being the powers that be. So what do you think? And please be careful in the comment section. They'll take me down for stuff you say. Can you believe that? Join me on Twitter. I may not be here for much longer. I'm really getting tired of being stifled, to tell you the truth. And I'm enjoying the new freedom over there on the other platform. So, having said that, what do you think? Is there a secret pedophile ring in Hollywood? Is there a thing called the Black Illuminati? Are they engaging in occultic behavior and weird Illuminati type SCX parties? What about the 27 Club? Is it a coincidence that all these major stars die in their 27th year? What is your favorite one of these conspiracy theories, and which ones do you think are true and which ones do you think are not true? You can leave your comments in the comment section. Do you think that stars like Elvis and Prince and Heath Ledger or Jim Morrison might have faked their own deaths so they could have normal lives? What about soul migration? Is Orlando Brown crazy as a bedbug? Or are they doing things like Freaky Friday and Big for real? Are the stars and the politicians literally able to possess random people? Don't. I'm out of coffee, and I need a lot of coffee for that one. Run out of coffee, run out of time. Do you think that Randy Quaid and his wife are a little woohoo, or do you think they are actually the victim of the Star Whackers? And do you think Paul McCartney really died? I will say this, whoever Paul McCartney was in Wings, that's the guy I'm the fan of. I don't know about the other guy, but the guy in Wings, yeah, some good music. That's me.